One frantic buzz on my phone, 50 missed calls saying my grandson is missing. My heart stopped. How did they lose him, and how would I find him? Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today's story puts our heroine, Linda, in an impossible situation, unfairly blamed and driven from her own home. Have you ever felt invisible or misunderstood by those closest to you? Stick around to see how she finds the strength to reclaim her life and protect the one who matters most. If you enjoy journeys of resilience and hope, don't forget to subscribe so I can keep bringing you more powerful stories.
I still remember the exact chill in the air that night, how the lamp over the kitchen island cast a harsh circle of light on Megan's silk robe, making her eyes look like hot coals. I'd come in from folding Daniel's laundry, clutching a stack of his worn t-shirts, when she screamed, "You ruined our lives. Get out." Emma lobbed her slipper at me like a javelin. Zoe laughed from the living room, sipping the coffee I'd made that morning as though she were watching a sitcom. Daniel stood behind Megan, shoulders hunched, silent. In that moment, my heart pounded so loud I thought she'd hear it. I'd lived in this house longer than I could remember, ever since Daniel was a scrawny kid with scraped knees chasing cicadas in the backyard. But right then, I realized I was invisible. My 37 years of quiet maintenance, the milk in the fridge, the towels folded, the counters wiped, had meant nothing. What triggered it? A simple phone call. The clinic's woman asked about our household income. On a whim, I mentioned Daniel did side jobs here and there even though he was on disability. I thought it was small talk, harmless. They called it reportable income. That detail was the excuse Megan used to rally everyone against me, to make me the scapegoat. My final glance at the photo over the fireplace, a family picnic from 2005, Daniel grinning wide while I held his hand, felt like a punch to the gut. I gathered one bag, tossed in a coat, my pills, and the address list from my little makeshift binder, and I walked out into the cold night without explaining, without apology. The front door clicked behind me, and I realized no one stopped me. I stepped out into the night's chill with nothing but a duffel bag slung over my shoulder and a heart racing against the rhythm of my own footsteps. The streetlights painted long, wavering shadows across the pavement as I walked until exhaustion pulled me toward a dimly lit corner cafe. Solace Brew, its flickering sign promised, and it felt like an invitation tailor-made for someone ready to disappear. Inside, the hum of a single espresso machine and low jazz on the speakers greeted me. Rosa, the barista with purple-streaked hair and a friendly grin, recognized me immediately from the way I'd trembled over my coffee a few days earlier. She set a steaming latte before me without asking. I cradled the cup, letting its warmth seep into my fingers. When I fished out a napkin and scrawled, "Thank you for the coffee and the quiet," she nodded as if she understood the weight I was carrying. That night, I found a tiny studio behind a nail salon, its door barely large enough to admit my bag. The floors were scuffed, the walls yellowed, but I didn't care. This was sanctuary. I unpacked the few essentials, pill bottles, the address list with numbers I'd scribbled down, a battered journal full of to-do lists for everyone else in my old life. I flopped onto the twin bed and stared at the ceiling, tracing its water stains like constellations. By morning, the novelty of solitude began to wear thin. I rose at 6 out of habit, made instant oatmeal, and tuned into a game show rerun I'd seen a dozen times. In my old life, I'd stirred pots and folded laundry before anyone else stirred. Now I folded napkins for an audience of one, myself. The silence felt both liberating and oppressive, a constant reminder that I was untethered. Desperate for community, I logged onto Reddit. r/JustNoMIL became my confessional booth, where stories poured in from women who'd been gaslit, blamed, and cast aside by their own families. r/ProRevenge offered tales of poetic justice. r/OneBag taught me how to minimize my life to what could fit in a single pack. Clicking through those threads, I realized I was part of a larger narrative, women quietly slipping out of toxic homes, reclaiming the right to breathe. My studio walls were blank, begging for life. So I pinned up a cheap world map, each pushpin marking a place I'd once dreamed of. Lavender fields in Provence, the vibrant markets of Marrakesh, the misty fjords of Norway. I added a new pin for Seattle, where Rosa told me stories of rainy resilience. These pins, colorful and defiant, were my new to-go list, my roadmap away from heartbreak. Week 1 passed in a blur of coffee runs and late-night Reddit deep dives. I spent hours crafting posts, anonymously sharing pieces of my story, seeking advice, offering empathy in return. Virtual strangers taught me strategies. Keep a detailed journal of events, save text messages, don't engage with gaslighting. Their support felt strange, but steady, like the pulse of a heart I thought I'd lost. But as dawn broke on day 8, the calm cracked open. A throaty ringtone sliced through my solitude. I blinked at the screen. Unknown caller. My pulse skipped. I let it ring. Twice. Then I answered, voice flat. Hello. Grandma, please, came a voice so small, so raw, it splintered my resolve. Lucas? I whispered, heart-wheeling. Where are you? My facade of vanished strength crumbled as I realized this quiet refuge was about to become the starting point of a frantic search. The moment I heard Lucas's voice, everything shifted. The studio's peeling wallpaper and drooping curtain rods faded into the background as I rapidly texted back, stay calm. Who are you with? Are you safe? Seconds ticked by before a reply, I'm with Jordan. He's safe, but I can't go back. Jordan Reyes, my neighbor's teenage son, had always been a good kid with a kind heart. Years ago, he had lent Lucas comic books and let him practice skateboard tricks in his driveway. That Jordan had opened his door now meant the rest of their house had slammed shut. I grabbed my purse and coat, texts flying between Jordan's number and a frantic Google search for emergency guardianship procedures in my county. I printed out my lease, my ID, a handful of old family photos showing Lucas reading at my knee. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the stack. Outside, rain pattered against the pavement, like the world itself was weeping for the chaos our family had created. I flagged down a cab, reciting addresses to the driver like a mantra. Inside the cab, I typed a rapid post to r/legal advice. Emergency guardianship. Minor harbored by friend. Need guidance. Replies poured in links to forms, suggestions to contact the family law hotline, encouragement not to delay. I arrived at Jordan's cramped apartment building under a flickering street lamp. Lucas was huddled on the steps, knees drawn to his chest, eyes red. He stood when he saw me, but his shoulders remained hunched in exhaustion and fear. I knelt beside him, pulling him into a gentle hug. He melted against me, sobbing, "They told me I was weak for defending you. Said if I loved you so much, go live with you." He held out trembling hands showing scraps of paper, a text from Emma mocking him for being grandma's sidekick, a Snapchat clip of Zoe laughing as she tossed his things down the hall. That digital cruelty cut deeper than any thrown slipper ever could. With Jordan's help, I escorted Lucas into the lobby and dialed my local courthouse. I described the harassment, the threats, the emotional abuse, each word a hammer strike freeing us from the chain of silence. The clerk emailed forms and confirmed a hearing date 2 days out. In the meantime, we camped in a nearby coffee shop. Lucas buried his face in a hot chocolate mug, and I took notes on every slip of paper in sight. That night, back in my little studio, Lucas and I spread his comic book collection on the floor. I let him read aloud, his voice wobbling but growing stronger with each panel turned. I added a new pushpin to my map, justice, because we were on our way. Sleep was uneasy, the walls echoing every shriek of passing wind. But when dawn crept through the curtains, Lucas was already awake, doodling in a notebook. He sketched 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, standing side by side. Above them, he wrote in block letters, "Safe together." That drawing became Exhibit A. The next morning, Ms. Harper, our legal aid attorney, filed the emergency custody petition. She presented the counselor's letter from Ms. Reynolds, Jordan's written affidavit, and Lucas's drawing to the judge, each document reinforcing the truth we'd gathered from the shadows. As we waited in the courtroom hallway, Lucas reached for my hand. No words passed between us, just the gentle squeeze that said, "I trust you." In that hush before the gavel, I realized we had already reclaimed far more than a house. We'd reclaimed our story, our dignity, and each other. The morning of the hearing dawned brighter than I dared hope. Sunbeams cut through the courtroom's tall windows and danced across the polished wooden benches. I sat beside Lucas at a small table near the front, clutching his hand beneath the paperwork spread out before us. His eyes were wide but determined, no longer that frightened boy on the steps of Jordan's apartment, but an ally in this fight for justice. Ms. Harper arrived in crisp navy, her briefcase in hand like a shield. She gave me a reassuring nod as we stood to approach the bench. "Your Honor," she began, voice calm and clear, "we seek emergency temporary custody of Lucas Clarke on the grounds of emotional abuse, intentional neglect, and coercion by his primary caregivers, Ms. Megan Clarke and Mr. Daniel Clarke, who have effectively exiled him from his home." I watched Lucas tuck a loose strand of hair behind his ear, reminding me how he used to do that when he was nervous before a spelling bee. His counselor's letter from Ms. Reynolds lay before the judge, a sober account of his tearful confession that Emma had kicked him out and Zoe had publicly mocked him as a parasite. Jordan's affidavit, typed and signed, described how he'd opened his door at midnight to find Lucas on his doorstep, tears in his eyes and nowhere else to turn. And then there was Lucas's own drawing, stick figures at a small table, the taller one sheltering the smaller under a roof of safety. The judge flipped through the exhibits without comment, yet I sensed each piece landing heavily on her desk. She looked up at me, her eyes quiet but probing. "Mrs. Clarke, is there any immediate harm Lucas would face returning to his mother's care?" I took a breath. "Your Honor, returning him would subject him to ongoing emotional manipulation and isolation. He's expressed fear of speaking up, and when he did, he was punished, locked out in the rain, shamed in front of his cousin, and lectured by his father to stop being dramatic. He needs stability, not more punishment." Next, the defense counsel for Megan Clarke stood. She wore a charcoal skirt suit and spoke in clipped tones about parental rights and the presumption that Ms. and Mr. Clarke had the authority to discipline their child. But when she waved Megan's own text messages, where Megan crowed, we finally drove her out. They looked less like maternal concern and more like exultation at cruelty. Daniel's silence was damning. He never rose, never spoke, never met Lucas's eyes. After a brief recess, the judge returned. She peered at Lucas with a mixture of compassion and professionalism. "I have reviewed the evidence," she said, voice measured. "Temporary emergency custody to the petitioner, Mrs. Clarke, is hereby granted, effective immediately. A formal hearing on long-term arrangements will be scheduled within 30 days. A hush fell. I felt Lucas's hand tremble in mine, and I squeezed it gently. Around us, the gasps and low murmurings of attorneys and court staff filled the air. Miss Harper collected the stamped documents, her lips curving in a small, triumphant smile. Outside the courthouse, Lucas and I paused under the colonnade's shadowy archways. He gazed up at me, and for a moment I saw that frightened boy again. Then his lips curved in a shy grin. "Thanks for fighting," he whispered. "Always," I promised, ruffling his hair. Our steps back to the car felt lighter, each click of my heels on the sidewalk a beat of newfound freedom. For the first time in months, I breathed without that tight knot of dread in my chest. That evening, in the glow of our tiny studio's single overhead bulb, we celebrated. I heated a boxed mac and cheese, no powdered nonsense, but the good kind with real cheddar, and we each got our own bowl. Lucas perched on the edge of the couch. I sat beside him, inhaling that sharp, savory aroma. We ate in companionable silence, occasionally clinking our plastic spoons in a makeshift toast. Later, as he brushed his teeth, he paused and held up his phone. On the screen was a pinned post on r/GrandparentsRights that I'd written earlier. I walked away from my own family, nearly lost my grandson, but we found each other in the rubble. Today, I have legal custody and a tiny apartment full of love. To anyone feeling invisible, your voice matters. Underneath, upvotes ticked upward, comments of encouragement encouraging me to keep sharing our journey. I pocketed the phone and hugged Lucas tight. Before bed, we sat on the balcony, just a sliver of concrete jutting from our building, overlooked by a fire escape staircase. He leaned against me as I pointed out the constellations I'd learned in Girl Scouts, Orion's Belt, the Big Dipper, even faint Cassiopeia. We added a new pushpin to our map for justice and another for togetherness. That night, I slept without nightmares, just the gentle hum of the neighbor's TV muffled through the walls. Gone were the echoes of laughter aimed to wound. In its place was the quiet certainty that we had reclaimed our home, our safety, and our future. The weeks after the hearing passed in a comforting blur of routine and healing. I woke each morning to Lucas's sleepy face framed in my doorway, his backpack slung over one shoulder as he prepared for school. I packed his lunch, 2 peanut butter sandwiches cut into triangles, and a note reminding him he was brave, and kissed him goodbye. He shoved off with a nod, and I returned to my office at the little fold-out desk I'd cobbled together from a yard sale find and some leftover scrap wood. My days became a steady rhythm. Freelance writing assignments, legal paperwork for the custody extension, and occasional visits to the community center to share my story at a support group for displaced grandparents. My phone buzzed with texts of congratulations and solidarity. I even connected with Rosa from Solace Brew, who hired me to write blog posts for the cafe's website, profiles of local neighbors, recipes for herbal teas, and reflections on finding courage. Back in our studio, Lucas and I transformed the bare walls into a gallery of our life together. His crayon drawings sat alongside my prints of lavender fields and night markets, those pins on the map I once dreamed of now coming alive in color and texture. He added a self-portrait of us hugging under the words "safe together." I snapped a photo and posted it on r/GrandparentsRights with the caption, "He's home. We're safe. And this time, we're in control." His schoolwork improved rapidly. Gone were the days of headaches and excuses. Instead, he showed up punctually, participated in class, and even joined the art club. His counselor, Ms. Reynolds, wrote to say how his eyes had brightness again, how he'd volunteered to lead a kindness corner in the library. On Saturday mornings, we explored the city. We rode the light rail to the waterfront, where seagulls swooped over the salt-tinged breeze. I bought him fish and chips from a food truck while we watched cargo ships glide past. We walked home along the piers, sharing fries and planning our next map pushpin, Seattle waterfront. One evening, we sat at our tiny table and opened a manila envelope. It was from the court, a notice that Linda Clarke had appealed the temporary custody order. My stomach twinged. I set the envelope aside and looked at Lucas. He shrugged, confident. "We'll handle it," he said. And we would. Because we had learned that day in the courtroom that justice isn't a one-and-done affair, it's a commitment to persist. I reached for his small hand, tracing the knuckles I used to rock to sleep. "We'll handle it together." In the quiet weeks that followed, I found myself reflecting on the person I'd become. Gone was the woman who tidied up after others at the cost of her own voice. In her place stood someone who could speak up, ask for help, and protect the one person who still believed in her. I updated my Reddit post 3 times that month. 1. After the appeal notice, recounting the new legal steps, soliciting advice on dealing with parental appeals. 2. After Lucas's art show at school, proudly sharing his "Safe Together" mural on the library wall. 3. After our coastal trip, a photo of us on a beach with driftwood sculptures and wind-whipped hair. Each post was met with a chorus of encouragement, prayers, and shared experiences. Virtual friends reminded me I wasn't alone, that the struggle to find voice and belonging crosses borders and generations. One chilly evening, Lucas and I curled up on the couch under a hand-stitched quilt I'd started during sleepless nights. He yawned, heavy-eyed, and leaned into me. I stroked his hair and whispered, "Sweet pea, I used to think home was a place. Now I know it's a person or two who stand by you when the world turns away." He smiled sleepily. "I'm glad it's you." I kissed his forehead. "Me too." As I turned off the lamp, I noticed the map on the wall, now dotted with a half-dozen new pins: Justice, Kindness Corner, Seattle Waterfront, Art Show, and Beach Day. One final blank corner remained, waiting for our next adventure, our next triumph. I drifted off knowing that whatever came next, a legal appeal, a new school challenge, or another unexpected twist, I would face it head-on, with Lucas by my side. Because we had rewritten our story from pain to power, from exile to embrace. And now each morning's sunrise wasn't a reminder of what we'd lost, but a promise of what we had, a home built on love, truth, and the courage to keep going.
What did you take away from this journey? Drop your thoughts or feedback in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter of our adventure. Thank you for staying with me until the very end.